after our short break from the product track. Let's get started with the next guest. He is actually a friend of mine. We work together at Hootsuite, and now he's VP of product at Personio. And he's gonna talk about feedback and how feedback impact and change product, and how validation is as important, if not more. So let's welcome Alex Grant. Ciao, Alex.
Ciao, Massimo. It's great to be with you and sharing my perspective, my hot take as part of this event. Um,
Awesome. Slides are on. The stage is yours.
Amazing. Thanks, Max. And yes, thank you all for tuning in. And I'm really excited to share my perspective. I'm as Max mentioned, I've been in product management for basically my entire professional career, and have accumulated a couple of hot takes along the way. And so when asked to share my perspective on something maybe a little bit controversial, the thing that came to mind was feedback. How do we bridge this gap between the customers and the customer facing teams of a piece of software and the teams that are designing, strategizing, and building it? And so my hot take, my talk is entitled that feedback won't change the product. That's the spicy bit, but validation will. And so I'm excited to share that perspective based off my experience. So a little bit, just very quickly about me. My accent is North American. I'm originally originally from the U.S. I grew up in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is home to the world's largest drum, which I hit as a child. But I've been in Europe. I'm based now in Munich, working for Personio SE, which is an HR tech company, really a kind of people operating system. I've been in Munich for the past 2.5 years, and before that, spent about 3.5 years working closely with Massimo in Milan. So my role at Personio and the kind of roles that I've had in the past are really related to product leadership, leading other product managers, getting my hands dirty, working directly with engineers, designers, and customers to build software. So one of the dynamics that I've seen play out over my career is pretty consistent, which is, and I've been on both sides of this equation. My career originally began in working with customers as an account manager. And so I've just seen this tension that exists between the user experience side of the product or the implementation side of the product, and then trying to get that information to make better product building decisions. And so the terms and the kind of sentiment that I've heard expressed repeatedly is, from a customer facing team perspective, that there's this black box, that they communicate feedback, that they try and connect people with different types of information, but ultimately the roadmap is the product of some black magic that they don't understand. And it's really challenging for them to continue to put feedback into a system that they don't know how it's being leveraged, that this loop is never closed. On the other side, I see product teams every day that are overwhelmed by noise, and they're unable to discern valuable signal from that noise. And so more feedback coming in is actually, they've reached a saturation point where it's not effective at altering kinds of priorities that might take weeks or months or even quarters to shift and to adapt to. And so what does this end up in? Well, what ends up happening is that inertia builds, and that product teams continue to do the thing because they've always done it, and that customer-facing teams continue to input feedback, but it gets lower and lower quality. And the outcome of this, and this is a real tragedy, is that there is incremental progress across a wide area versus focusing in on places that are really relevant right now and making a real difference inside of the product in that moment. Really, like, taking a signal and acting on it. So what are we going to do about this problem? Well, the answer is certainly not, at least from my experience, it's certainly not building the perfect feedback mechanism, because the perfect feedback mechanism just does not exist. All of the kind of taxonomy that you can create, all of the kind of perfect loop signaling, it just is going to break down at scale. But there are things that can be done, concrete things that can be done to improve this connection between customer needs and the product team. And I want to talk about a handful of them. So the first is that this motion of pushing feedback into a product team that is saturated is never going to result in kind of positive outcomes. What needs to be flipped is that product teams need to feel it is their responsibility to pull information that validates their decision, that they are really not in they are really not in a decision-making capability on their own. They earn that privilege, they earn that right by being connected to the signal that comes. And so this is about a product manager having an idea, having a sense of a priority, and then pulling validation on that idea. And that pulling then can maybe take them in other directions. But that is much more actionable than this processing motion of receiving feedback pushed to them. The other thing, and this is important for product teams, I'm speaking directly to kind of product folks out there, is that all of your decisions have to begin with evidence. That there is no kind of gut feel, I think that this should go, or there's no, I mean, evidence also needs to be robust. There's no like, well, you know, I was talking to this customer last week and they want me to do this, or even worse, I'm doing this because I've always done it. I came into this team and this was the priority and now it just continues to be. So product teams have to have an opinion on where that value is, and that opinion needs to be driven by evidence. And then finally, that validation, as I mentioned, directs the conversation. It biases the team towards action. If you're coming with an idea that you want to do something about, the only answer out of that conversation is, yes, I'm going to go and do that thing, or no, I'm going to go do another thing, which is much more active than processing feedback by passively. So in practice, how have I seen teams be successful in moving into this kind of motion? I see that I didn't update this this first bit, but the first thing is that you need to understand that garbage in is garbage out. So do invest in a line taxonomy that can help different parts of the business speak the same language about a particular area of the product. You'd be amazed at how much signal and how much productivity gets lost because one part of the organization is thinking about something called an inbox, and another part of the organization is thinking about it called the central hub, and these things just get lost, and it's really difficult to figure out signal. So invest in a taxonomy, whether it's that kind of simple example or something a bit more structural like your data taxonomy, to make sure that all of the information of your organization can be structured and be available in the same way. The second thing is that you can make this lift lighter. And there are a lot of tools that are out there that can take everyday sales activity and then turn that into data that can be parsed for making valuable product decisions. So there's a lot of technology out there that again, just kind of sits on top of normal everyday activities and then turns it into the evidence that then product can use to create ideas that then they in turn bring for validation. And then finally, this is something that someone at Hootsuite told to me once, and it really has stuck with me, which is that we all reserve the right to wake up smarter. So start a practice, see how it feels, and then just improve on it, get better, and know that doing something more productive or more valuable than what you have today is better than not doing anything at all, even if it's not the perfect thing. So the key takeaway when I was thinking about how to sum all of this up into a pithy quote, I resonate with the Socratic method and with Socrates, which is that when you accept that you don't know anything, and this is, I think, a hard lesson that a lot of product managers learn, you're actually on the road to true wisdom. So I think curiosity is really important here. Curiosity about and vulnerability, and sometimes about bringing an idea for validation. This takes more courage. But it takes more courage than just receiving feedback, but it results in stronger outcomes. And then just to throw a little cultural reference in there, Ygritte from Beyond the Wall also has some knowledge that is aligned with Socrates and her advice for Jon Snow. So thank you very much. I hope that this hot take was resonating with some of the folks in the session, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. This was super insightful. I think hot topic in every product team. So guys, if you have any question, write them in the chat. I'll start with a quick question. You were mentioning feedback from the sales team, which of course, on one side, it's probably more interesting because it's more like open-minded. Often the user has not seen the product and they tend to describe better what their ideal state would be. In your experience, what's more valuable, the feedback from prospects or the feedback that is coming from success and support?
I love that question. It's exactly as you say. I think that the customers that do not have an opinion about your product will be more relevant for directional information about where your overall market is going. Whereas signal from your existing customer base is inherently going to be conservative. Existing customer bases is the dirty secret. The larger your kind of customer base is, the more headwinds you have towards innovation, because these customers want incremental improvements on the software. They already have kind of trained built-in bias for the existing patterns that they use. So it depends a little bit what you're trying to optimize for in terms of the signal that you're collecting. I think any good product organization needs a mix, but you need to be, as you point out, Max, very thoughtful about what kind of bias exists in each source. And certainly prospects, I think, tend to have a wider pulse on things that are more generally in your space, but then maybe they're not as relevant to the pains that your customers are having today. If you go and solve prospect problems and you bring them into a product that customers can't use, like, you're optimizing for the wrong thing.
Sure. Nice. And how do you validate product decision on things that don't exist? It's just qualitative, or can you do something to get more quantitative feedback on a totally new feature before you jump in that 6-month product development cycle that might not bring in any value?
Yeah. There are a couple of different ways. I think that what I've seen anyway is just be biased towards collecting some kind of signal in action, because it inevitably, you're going to learn pretty quickly whether there's a there, or if it's not something that's going to resonate. But like the methods, like the concrete tactical methods that I've seen work well is, you can do things like design sprints, where you actually like purposefully set out with a progress to build some type of lightweight prototype, and then bring that kind of new concept to a select user base, like to somebody that you think is relevant. That is a certain level of investment. Another form of validation is just like building options, like, hey, like we could go and focus on this problem or this problem or this problem, and just getting some quick signal from a handful of customers to say, yes, I would go in that direction, and or no, I wouldn't. So I think those are kind of the handful of methodologies, but there's a bunch out there. Dual track agile, where you're kind of constantly evaluating ideas and progressing them through. I've seen a bunch of different teams use those.
Awesome. And I think one thing that I always found challenging about the big new stuff that prospect ask is very often, I mean, it's more creative, it can open new directions that are interesting and potentially can expand the business. On the other side, very often, it's more an idea of what they want. And very often, they ask about the latest shiny object that they think they need.
Generative AI.
And maybe it's still valuable, because during a sales conversation, having that kind of feature has that wow effect that helps you close the deal. But then when you look at product adoption of that feature, it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that is a dynamic that plays out frequently. And I think there's a certain aspect of experimentation that comes in there, where you have to, it sometimes kind of allow a customer to experience something and see if it actually is generating value. But then there's also this exercise to always try and dig into the problem. Like this request is in service of some type of need. And and I think, like, in certain circumstances, the ability to drill down into that need and say, hey, this need sounds like this, that sounds like this, that sounds like this, and try and group it together. Teams that can do that rapidly, can sometimes shortcut that process.
Yeah. Awesome. Alex, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure, Max. Thank you for having me.
Ciao. And for everyone else, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.